Does it? Okay, let me see something. Yeah. Okay. How's that? Okay. How's that? I'm good.
All right, folks, coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered for Tuesday, February 26, 2019. RKelly is out of jail on bail, but attorney Michael Avenatti is here with the details on the latest tape he submitted to prosecutors. He says that tape has another underage girl RKelly's having sex with. We'll also be joined by Kenyette Barnes, co-chair of the RKelly movement. She has some thoughts about the big picture regarding sexual violence in the black community. In 2013, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Today, the Democrats who control the House took the first step towards restoring and protecting the Voting Rights Act. Congresswoman Terry Sewell of Alabama lays out why we need this now. The race-based gerrymandering in North Carolina was so bad a local judge said the resulting elected legislature was unconstitutional and voided a voter ID amendment they put on November's ballot. We'll talk to the head of the North Carolina NAACP, the Reverend Dr. T. Anthony Spearman. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell finally speaks up about election fraud in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District, except he calls it voter fraud. But then he also forgot it was his own party who was behind it. Yes, I guess we're going to take little old Mitch to school to explain to him the difference. The NAACP has a new way to support them and maybe make some money in the process. We'll tell you about this new fund that they actually launched on Wall Street today. And I was on the Fox Business News today with Charles Payne debating a conservative, DeRoy Murdoch, about reparations. Poor DeRoy. You might want to actually read a history book to understand American history and black history. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop.
I don't know.
The fine. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
All right, folks, RKelly is out of jail. A woman from the Chicago suburbs listing herself as a friend of RKelly posted the $100,000 that was needed for Kelly's $1 million bail. He got out late last night. This is video of him being escorted out of jail by his attorney. Now, Kelly is charged with sexually abusing 4 victims, three underage, over a period of a dozen years. He has pleaded not guilty. Now, this latest indictment of RKelly coincided with attorney Michael Avenatti providing damning video evidence to the Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox. Avenatti said one of his clients came forward with a videotape showing RKelly having sex with an underage girl. Now he says he has another tape. Michael Avenatti joins us right now via the phone. Michael, so let's talk about the first tape you provided prosecutors. I've read different stories. That particular tape, the young woman who was on the tape from the 2008 case, is she the same person on that tape you provided Kim Fox?
Yes.
And so are you representing someone who came forward with that tape, or are you representing somebody who's making allegations against R. Kelly?
Well, let me clarify. I represent 7 clients, 2 parents, 3 victims, and 2 of the 3 victims have charges in the indictment. So 2 of the 4 in the indictment. And then 2 whistleblowers, individuals that were close to R. Kelly, and I'm now representing as it relates to them cooperating with authorities.
Did these folks come to you as a result of the Lifetime documentary, that the 6-part series that aired, or have they come to you prior to that documentary being aired?
No, long prior to the documentary, with the exception of a couple of them who have come to me within the last week. But we were first contacted about this situation in April of last year. I didn't even know Lifetime was doing a documentary, frankly. And we started to dive into this. We agreed to do it on a pro bono basis because I was so outraged by what I heard. And I feel that these victims have really been done wrong by the system. So we began this investigation, which we did very quietly around the country. We put a lot of time into this thing, and we didn't disclose anything about it until the time was right, which was earlier this month.
And you now say you provided the state's attorney another video, provided them yesterday, that has some pretty damning language on that video, correct?
Yeah, and there's no question. I mean, the video and the audio are very, very clear. Roland, this is not the situation from 2008. There's no question as to the clarity of the video. There's no question it's R. Kelly. His mole on his back is clearly visible, which was a big issue in the prior trial. His voice is recognizable. There's no question the girl is underage. Both he and her refer to her as only being 14 years of age. It is a very, very damning piece of evidence, and I don't believe that R. Kelly will be able to survive this.
And let me read. You posted this on Twitter. Henry, go to my iPad. In response to press inquiries, I can confirm that the video we provided to prosecutors yesterday includes R. Kelly clearly stating the following to the victim, sometimes on multiple occasions: give me that 14-year-old vagina. That's not what he said, though. Show daddy that 14-year-old vagina. Spread those legs and show me that 14-year-old vagina. Give me that 14-year-old booty hole. The victim also refers to herself as being 14 years of age repeatedly on the tape. The point that in the 2008 trial, you're right. First of all, one of the issues, he tried to say that it wasn't him. It was a friend or someone else or a brother. But on that video, that particular video, someone from the outside called him by his name, and he answered yes. And in that case, the jury didn't say that wasn't him. The jury could not ascertain the age of the girl on the video, which is why he was found not guilty on child pornography charges.
Well, that was one of the reasons. I mean, there were a bunch of reasons in that case. I mean, that was one of them. The other one was that the victims did not testify. This case, a number of the victims are going to testify. There's 4 victims set forth in the indictment. But, I mean, this is not role play on this tape. I mean, this girl is clearly 14 years of age. She states it. He states it multiple times. And you can also tell by other conduct on the tape that she's underage, based on some other things that she says on the tape, which I'm not going to get into the details of. But I do not see how he can possibly overcome this mountain of evidence. And finally, after 28 years of sexually abusing and assaulting young African-American girls underage, he is finally going to face justice, and it's not a day too soon in my book.
You said earlier that you're representing a couple of people who used to be close to him or in his camp. Are those the folks who provided this video, and are you going to submit other videos to Kim Foxx?
Well, we've located a third video, or we've come to know of a third video, which we're trying to locate. And then if we're able to, we're going to promptly turn that over. I'm not at liberty to discuss where exactly we got the first 2 videos. But like I said, this has been a lengthy investigation. It's taken a lot of time and a lot of effort, but it's paid some dividends.
All right, Michael Avenatti, we certainly appreciate you joining us here on the show. Thanks a lot. All right, folks, after R. Kelly got out of jail last night, he quickly went to a McDonald's in the River North section of Chicago. Here's video that folks took at that McDonald's of R. Kelly in that particular restaurant. And so there were individuals there who he signed autographs, also took photos with them. When it was over, he actually went to a cigar bar in Chicago as well. Now, we also have details in terms of the woman who actually bailed him out of jail, and that is, of course, she signed the slip. She signed the particular slip. Her name is Valencia Love. Owns several different restaurants. They're in a suburb of Chicago, and she also owns a daycare center as well. And so she, in talking with different folks, she said that she bailed him out because they are friends, and that he's out. He does. She said that he has a right to be innocent until proven guilty. And when I was sitting here watching, I was on social media earlier, and I was looking at the video at the McDonald's, also looking at, of course, talking about the woman who bailed him out. I saw these tweets from Kenyette Tisha Barnes, who, of course, is one of the co-founders of the Mute R. Kelly movement. And she said, R. Kelly going to McDonald's doesn't surprise me. People bailing him out of jail doesn't surprise me. People playing his music and dancing on the hood of cars at the McDonald's doesn't surprise me. We have a pathological apathy regarding sexual violence in the black community. She joins us right now. Kenyette, glad to have you back on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
It's great to be back. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. So, first of all, I got to get your reaction. I've already seen some people reacting. They said that there's no way in the world they would be having their child at a daycare of where somebody who owned it bailed out R. Kelly. And the others said they're shocked that a woman came forward, a 47-year-old woman came forward to bail out R. Kelly. Your thoughts?
I have so many that are swirling around in my head, but I agree with those who believe that Miss Love's the audacity to own a daycare center and to then subsequently bail out a sexual predator is reprehensible. I mean, the cognitive dissonance must be giving her whiplash. So I do agree with those individuals, definitely. It's inappropriate.
And when you talk about the folks, the reaction to R. Kelly going to the McDonald's, there were some people who went in, got autographs. There were people who were cheering him on, saying, "We love you, R. Kelly," playing his music there. Did not sit too well with you.
Not at all. So there's a couple of things. I mean, when we only have a 3% conviction rate in the United States for sexual violence, sexual crimes anyway, and over 200,000 untested rape kits in the United States, it really speaks and it tells us that we don't take sexual crimes seriously. So let's deconstruct that further into the black community. You often hear whenever you bring up sexual crimes in a black community that white supremacy is what we need to be focused on, not sex crimes. And, while others might enter this as a legal professional, I enter this as an activist and as a survivor of child pornography. And to be totally honest with you, this is something that happens in the black community all the time. And black girls are not believed. They are not protected. We live in a culture where there is apathy around sexual violence in the black community. And I think I made that pretty clear in that tweet.
And one of the things that's interesting, I talk about the woman who bailed out R. Kelly, Valencia Love. She released a statement saying that police should be more concerned about priests who abuse kids than R. Kelly. And I'm thinking about just yesterday where the highest-ranking priest ever, the Vatican treasurer, the bishop there in Australia, found guilty of sexually assaulting two choir boys. I'm just trying to understand why can't both things happen at the same time? If someone in this country, entertainer or not, is having sex with underage girls, I don't understand why the Chicago police can't do that job and target priests who are assaulting kids.
I agree 100%. If you listen to the whataboutisms, as I often say, you would think that we only have one investigator in the United States. We have the capacity and the bandwidth within our law enforcement world to actually focus on several things at once, including the over 30-year sexual predatory history of Robert Sylvester Kelly.
And again, when you think about, for African Americans, when you look at radio stations still playing his music, there are people who say, look, he's been found not guilty, he's not being convicted, so therefore, why should I stop listening to his music? Why should I get rid of my playlist? Why should stations stop playing it? Your response when you hear that from black folks?
Neither was George Zimmerman, but the last time I checked, there were hundreds of thousands of people marching in the streets around the country when he was acquitted. Because we understand we have a culture, we have a history where white supremacy does sometimes go unchecked. Let's relate that to sexual violence. In the black community, sexual violence goes unchecked. Most survivors of sexual violence don't even bring their accusers to justice. When they go forth and talk about it, they're told to shut up, that they shouldn't talk about it because it brings shame upon the family, shame upon the community. We have generational trauma when it comes to having sexual predators in our own families. Every Thanksgiving dinner, Roland, many black women are forced to sit down, hold hands, pray, and eat turkey with their predators. Tell me we don't have a problem about sexual violence in our community, and I can bring you the receipts.
All right, then. Well, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot. And we'll, of course, be covering this story, and then we'll see if Michael Avenatti has another tape to drop on Kim Foxx and the Cook County State's Attorney's Office in the RKelly case. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks. Let's now come here to D.C., Capitol Hill, where today Democrats introduced H.R. 4, which is focused on restoring the Voting Rights Act, which was gutted in the 2013 Shelby County versus Holder Supreme Court decision, which really what it got rid of was the pre-clearance and oversight of the Department of Justice. And the moment that happened in 2013, Republicans across the country immediately rushed to enact voter ID laws and other forms of laws to deal with the issue of voting. Some of them were later struck down. Others did move forward. When you think about the 2016 election, Reverend Dr. William J. Barber often says that voter suppression was one of the issues that largely ignored that had an impact on Donald Trump actually winning by 77,000 votes in 3 states. But Wisconsin alone, many believe that voter ID there impacted some 200,000 people, not just African Americans, but elderly, white voters as young voters as well. And so today, the Democrats met on Capitol Hill to announce the introduction of H.R. 4. Here is Alabama Congresswoman Terry Sewell, there from the Black Belt of Alabama, which, of course, when you think about Selma, you think about Birmingham, that's where all of this originated.
So to close out, I want to again thank those who are the steady drumbeat for voting rights in America, our amazing voting rights advocates. These groups have really been the drumbeat for so many of us. I know that we all want to take a picture with John Lewis, so I'm going to close this out by just simply saying Shelby decision really issued a challenge to Congress, the Supreme Court did, for us to come up with a Section 4 that was modern day, a modern day formula. And our efforts are now to show that without Shelby, it's been pretty easy to see what state legislatures have been doing across this country without the protection, the full protections of the Voting Rights Act. They have been suppressing the right to vote in the name of fraud, voter fraud, in the name of not having enough resources. They're closing down polling locations. In the name of ostensibly making it fundamentally easier to vote, they are indeed making it harder to vote. So we stand together today, and we introduce, along with 200 plus members of the House today, the Voting Rights Advancement Act. I am very proud and want to acknowledge my great staff who came up with these great buttons and all the wonderful work that we're all doing, but this is just a drumbeat. This legislation, in order to become law, must pass the Senate, the House, the Senate, and be signed by a president. And currently, we have an environment that's hostile to doing what we can do to make it easier for people to vote. We have to acknowledge that too many states have gone unchecked. That's why we have court decisions like that in North Carolina that said that they had crafted a law, a state law, with precision, surgical precision, that was done to exclude African Americans. And in the state of Texas, they're still battling. So I think it's so important that we all acknowledge that there is a problem and that we're here to fix it. We believe that the Voting Rights Advancement Act is that fresh start. It's a 25-year look back, not to the days of 1960, not to the days of the 40s, but 1994 going forward. And we're going to look to see those states that have been egregious actors. I want to thank all of those who have participated in today's presser, and onward and upward. We're on our way to Selma this weekend, and we look forward to continuing to press for the voices of the excluded, because after all, that's what Restore the Vote stands for. We're restoring the vote, the voices of the excluded. Thank you all.
And of course, you heard there Congresswoman Terry Sewell mention going to Selma this weekend is the anniversary of Bloody Sunday there in Selma. I'll be there this weekend as well, hosting and moderating several events. One of the folks who was there in 1965, of course, was Congressman John Lewis at the time. He was a young man leading with Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He also spoke at today's news conference. Here we go to my iPad. Here's what Congressman John Lewis had to say.
Code shouldn't matter. The action of government affects every American, so every citizen should have an equal voice. And when that happens, politicians have to recognize the dignity and the worth of every human being. We all count. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. We're one people, we're one family. We all live in the same house, the American house. And there are forces in America today trying to take us back to another time and to another period. We've come too far and made too much progress to go back.
Let's bring in our panelist, Chris Metzler. He joins us via Skype, of course, a conservative strategist and author of Divided We Stand, The Search for America's Soul. We have in studio Monique Presley, legal analyst and crisis manager. And next to her, of course, is Malik Abdul, Republican political consultant. And joining us, first time, Dr. Niambi Carter, assistant professor in the Howard University Department of Political Science. We'll be sure try not to haze you here on the show. So let's start here. In fact, I'm going to start with two black Republicans first, Chris, and I'm going to start with Malik. So, Chris, to me, this is we go back after the Shelby Holder decision. You had Congressman Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin who introduced a bill to restore the VRA. Republicans pretty much ignored it. Only about a dozen or so signed on as co-sponsors. In the next session, the number was even lower. But the reality is it's been Republicans who have, after this decision, who rush to pass lots of what have been described as onerous voter suppression laws. Why won't the GOP stand with Democrats when it comes to this to protect the sanctity and the right to vote?
Well, let me give you the argument, and then I'll give you my analysis of that argument. The argument essentially is that the issue of voting is something that should be decided by the states. Now, that's the argument. Does that argument hold water? I don't think so. I think that, in fact, we really have to look at having Republicans endorse this move to reenact the Voting Rights Act.
And look, I keep making the point, Malik, Republicans they rush to pass these laws, and as long as Republicans keep standing in the way of folks voting, black folks are not even going to remotely consider voting for them.
Well, that's one of the reasons. I've been on record saying that, of course, I support efforts to restore any rights. I don't support voter suppression. I think one of the things that we can take from this, if we listen to the representative, we listen to Representative Sewell, she said something that was really true when she mentioned that I think it was the court said that Congress needs to come up with something, that Congress needs to act.
And in 6 years they haven't.
Well, no, I'm not.
Republicans made no effort to deal with it.
I'm not arguing that Congress hasn't acted. I'm actually referring to what Congresswoman Sewell is talking about when she says that Congress has to act. Now, what that looks like at the end, I don't know. I haven't looked at all the details of the proposal that the Democrats are putting forward, but I support any efforts to, whether it's restore voting rights or, make any sort of adjustments to people being able to vote or, any side of suppression efforts. I don't agree with it. I do wish that the Republican Party, unfortunately, this is one of those issues that has become purely political when it should not be. When we're talking about rights, when we're talking about whether it's the voting rights or LGBT rights or any of those things, when we're talking about that, it shouldn't be political. But unfortunately, we live in a time where those things. So if you're the left, you're supposed to think this. If you're on the right, you're supposed to think that.
Dr. Carter, bottom line is this here: Republicans are not going to support this, and you already have Senator Mitch McConnell, who is standing on the floor of the United States Senate, opining about election fraud and saying, oh, the reason this thing happened in North Carolina is because Democrats wouldn't back voter ID. I'm going to play this video later. But he wouldn't say jack that it was actually a Republican, Mark Harris, who actually was the one involved in election fraud. And he ignored the advice of his own son, a U.S. attorney, saying, don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had Mitch McConnell a month ago call H.R. 1, which was an attempt to address some of these issues about modernizing how we do registration, et cetera, as a power grab, right? The idea that turning Election Day into a national holiday, a paid holiday, so that it would make people's access to the ballot easier, he called that a power grab for Democrats. So I think Mitch McConnell has made it very clear, Senate Majority Leader, he has no interest in helping people secure the right to vote. And I believe, and I don't think there's any dispute here, at least, that having the access to the vote and being able to express that freely and with as little interference as possible is an ideal that shouldn't be partisan, right? But people are here playing politics, and you said something very critical, which is North Carolina was an example of election fraud, not voter fraud, which has been kind of this clarion call for Republicans to enact all these draconian measures. But really, voter fraud is a very, very small thing that doesn't happen. Election fraud, as we see, is very robust and is here. And this is the first time we've had a federal election have to be redone because of the actions of a person who wanted to win.
Well, Monique, no doubt this is going to pass the House. And I doubt very seriously Mitch McConnell is even going to allow this to even be up for a vote in the Senate, because let's just be clear. Republicans, if you look at the strategy of the party is actually to have fewer folks. You look at the people who were on Trump's so-called voter fraud commission, individuals who have long said point blank that, yes, if fewer people vote, it's better for us.
Right. So the first thing is, whenever anybody asks me why I would never, ever, ever be a Republican, I always come back to issues like this, because it's not that I can't be fiscally conservative in my thinking. I think that I can. I think the older that we get, we are. Just, you make some money, you think twice about how you want to spend it. It's not as easy to want to give it away in your taxes. So it's a commitment to be a Democrat. But when you look at issues like this, where people kept saying the Supreme Court gutted the VRA, no, that is not what happened. The Supreme Court took a particular portion and said it's outdated. Prove to us why Arizona should still have to ask for approval from Congress before they change their voting rights. Prove to us why Texas should have to do it. Prove to us why Alabama should have to do it, and so on for all of the 13 states. That could have been fixed within 6 months. Elections matter.
But they also didn't want to fix it. And in fact,
that's what I'm
because
saying.
the moment this decision was made, Republican legislatures across the country, Chris, rushed to implement voter ID laws, rushed to implement a range of other laws. You had Republicans in Maine who actually, the voters in Maine established same-day registration. The Republican legislature in Chris got rid of it, and then the voters came back in the next election, put it back on the ballot, and passed it 65% saying, who the hell told y'all to touch same-day registration?
Yeah, well, you know, that's a major part of the issue. And look, I don't think that the party is sufficiently educated on this issue. It's one of the things that those of us who work within the party are trying to get the party to understand at a very fundamental level. And it continues to be a struggle. That's the reality.
But there were also some good things that came out of some states being able to make changes, like online registration. So it wasn't that every change that was made was bad. It was that because there was a Republican-led Congress at the time, the short things that needed to be done to show Alabama still had a problem, and North Carolina still had a problem, and South Carolina still had a problem, those did not happen. And so what we need to see now is a fight for it. And we've got to explain this to our people, because I don't think it's just Republicans who don't understand what's really at stake, or maybe even understand the part that I just explained, you know, that this is a small part of a bigger piece of legislation, and it isn't gutted. We can put teeth back into it. It just will take the action of the legislature right now.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I disagree that Republicans don't understand. Actually, Republicans, particularly...
Oh, they get it.
They understood very well, and they implemented their plan to perfection, which was to suppress Black and Latino and poor and other voters that they did not want to see exerting their voice.
But not just them, but also, I keep saying this here, and I said this on a panel at CBC a couple of years ago to all the civil rights groups. Y'all have got to challenge young white folks, because what it also protected were any moves made in those states when it came to voting. There was a clerk in Wisconsin who was on record as saying she purposely moved an early voting location off of a college campus because too many young people had voted Democrat in the previous election. And what was happening is Republicans all across the country, what they were doing was they were actually taking voting locations and sending them out to far places that had small parking lots. So when you drove up, you were like, damn, it's a long line. You got frustrated. You saw in North Carolina, the most, to me, Alabama of the 21st century, where they literally said, I mean, look, and they have documentation, when do Black people vote early? 70+% voted during the first week. So they stripped early voting many places the first week to only one location in many counties. I was in Ohio in 2016, in Cuyahoga County, where Cleveland is. There was one early voting location before the election. You had to go downtown. I mean, so their whole deal was, we're going to make it as hard for people as possible to vote. And then we saw the response there. And so, again, I can't wait to see what the reaction is going to be when this bill gets passed. And can't wait to hear what Republicans in the House are going to say, Malik, and then what excuses they're going to offer. But again, this is one where it's a no-brainer. Republicans should be saying, no, let's make it easier for people to vote versus make it harder. And I don't think for a second that they're going to support this, and Mitch McConnell is going to fight it all the way in the Senate. And hopefully there are some senators with some courage who are going to say, you know what, this makes sense. We should go with it. And then, of course, if Trump vetoes it, get the votes to override his veto.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that I don't disagree, but I think it still goes back to what I said as far as where we are in the climate. You know, there are a lot of things that both parties should support. Just in principle, there are a lot of things that the party should support, but I think we're at a time where everything is so politically toxic that you will find people where it's good legislation.
Well, voting ain't politically toxic.
Well, unfortunately, this is where we are. You know,
it's only politically toxic because, look,
but it's one of many things.
Well, yeah, but they want to win.
One of a number of things.
They want to win, and then when they saw what happened in 2008, they said, oh, hell no, we are not going to have that coalition again, which is why Republicans in North Carolina were so dastardly with what they did. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Let's go to a break right now. Roland Martin Unfiltered. Back in a moment.
Be loving enough to absorb hate. Civil rights activist and Nobel laureate Martin Luther King Jr.
folks, HBCU Giving Day School, Johnson C. Smith University, founded in 1867, located in Charlotte, North Carolina. Of course, notable graduates, Earl Manigault, Obie Patterson, Frederick C. Branch, Eva Clayton, Don Pullen, Gary Siplin, and many, many more. To support Johnson Smith, go to jcsu.edu, jcsu.edu. All right, folks, calling all HBCU alumni, students, and leaders. Enter the Ford Motor Company HBCU Mobility Challenge and win $25,000 for your school. Building on their long-term support of HBCUs, Ford is looking to improve mobility in HBCU communities through innovative solutions. The winning program will receive a grant of up to $25,000 to implement the proposal. Now, the deadline is to apply is March 31st, 2019. Go to fgb.life for more information to apply. fgb.life for more information to apply. And if you're watching, tell your HBCU that if they don't know about this, they need to be doing it. You should be pushing this on social media. Again, folks, $25,000 that could go to one of the HBCU campuses. Ford goes further in our community, and we certainly appreciate them being a partner here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. All right, folks, so you've heard me talk about North Carolina, and I keep saying North Carolina is the Alabama of the 21st century. Well, guess what? We now have what's going on here now, where a judge there has thrown out a couple of laws that the legislature had put forward. You talk about just utterly ridiculous what they did in North Carolina. A state judge ruled that the makeup the state legislature was unconstitutional, okay, due to racial gerrymandering. Now, Wake County Superior Court Judge Brian Collins threw out a voter ID amendment that the legislature had put before voters in 2018. Now, again, let me explain to you. The Republicans in North Carolina rushed to put this on because the numbers didn't lie. They were about to lose their veto-proof majority. That's exactly what happened. Remember, this is the same North Carolina GOP who wanted to change the rules there to take most of the power of the state Supreme Court and move it to a lower court because the Democrats control the state Supreme Court. Democrats now control the state Supreme Court 6-1. Republicans ain't happy. Here's what the judge wrote in this decision. An illegally constituted General Assembly does not represent the people of North Carolina and is therefore not empowered to pass legislation that would amend the state's constitution. Joining us right now is Reverend Dr. T. Anthony Spearman, president of North Carolina NAACP. Reverend Spearman, glad to have you here. You and Democracy North Carolina, Repairs of the Breach, Reverend Barber, y'all have been fighting North Carolina over this. And what people don't understand, y'all have been ground zero for Republican efforts to stop folks from being able to vote and passing these onerous laws.
Roland, yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your program this evening. And we are very, very excited here in the state of North Carolina that Judge Collins has come forth with the decision that he's come forth with. We believe that he has demonstrated a courageous willingness to break out of the mold of what I call judicial imprudence, of citing existing improprieties and hamster wheeling them back to legislators to amend. And he set a precedent in place of naming the General Assembly for exactly what they are, and that is illegal and unconstitutional. We have been shouting this since about 2012 at least, and we are so grateful that a judge has stepped forward and has come up with the kind of language that we think is necessary for us to begin beating this voter suppression here in the state of North Carolina.
Reverend Spearman, NAACP again has been on the front lines on this very issue, and when you look at why Republicans were doing this, they were afraid that they no longer would have the power to be able to override the veto of a Democratic governor. And so I don't think people outside North Carolina really understand the hell y'all have been going through for the past several years in North Carolina.
Yep, 7 years. And I agree that people do not understand. And last night was a case in point. Last night, Governor Cooper made his State of the State address, and afterwards the response that came forth from Phil Berger, who is the head of the Senate there, he just said some things and went off script, actually, referring to this case because they're so afraid of what may happen. As you stated earlier, the Supreme Court leans toward the liberal side now, and we're not sure what's going to happen with the appellate court should they take this to appeal. We know we believe that they're probably going to appeal the case, but they're just uncertain at this point and continue to run scared because they know that their day is numbered. What do you want folks to do next? What do you want the folks who are watching, who are listening? What do you want them to do to help you guys to combat what you're dealing with in North Carolina? I want them to continue to watch closely because that, coupled along with what happened in Congressional District 9, as was stated earlier, election fraud is certainly prevalent here in the state of North Carolina, as well as voter fraud is prevalent. And I say that because I also happen to be a person who is a Board of Elections member here in Guilford County and saw firsthand some of the things that are being done at A&T's university. And so these young people are the suppression of their vote. I just need people to wake up and start looking at things and widening the lens of this voter suppression that's going on in our midst, because that's exactly what's going on. And if we continue to just marginalize it, we're not going to be able to see what needs to be seen. We have to begin to put a broader frame and frame the problem of voter suppression in a wider way. All right, Reverend. So that's what I would say to the people. Just widen the lens of this voter suppression that's going on. All right, Reverend T. Anthony Spearman, President, North Carolina NAACP. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Roland. All right, y'all going to love this one. Republicans depend on voter suppression to keep winning elections. So check this out, okay? So in North Carolina, the North Carolina 9th Congressional District, they do not have a member of Congress as we speak. Why? Because they, of course, had this contested election, which we now know after a series of hearings, they have ordered a new election. Mark Harris, who was the Republican who was running, this dude was so foul that he happily employed a person who was actually grabbing the ballots and they were throwing them out. Now, here's what's unbelievable. You had more Democrats who requested absentee ballots. Yet when the results were counted, Republicans were winning absentee ballots like 70-30. Huh? Now we know what this guy was pretty much doing was filling some of the ballots out, tossing them out. And isn't this the party that always talks about throwing folks in jail for voter fraud? You got a black woman in Texas who was sent to jail in a Republican county, Tarrant County, for 5 years, violating probation because she voted. Here is a guy who wanted to represent them in Congress who now says he's not going to run in the new election for health reasons. I got to go to my panel here before I play this soundbite. Malik, what the hell's wrong with your party in North Carolina 9th District?
Well, I can't make excuses for anything that, you just talked about.
Should Mark Harris be prosecuted?
If it's a prosecutable crime, then absolutely.
Chris Metzler, should Mark Harris be prosecuted for what he has done in that district? I mean, his own son, a U.S. attorney, testified he told his dad not to hire this dude, and his dad ignored him.
I'm going to go back to a chant from the last election, lock him up.
Simple as that. Doc, I mean, this is, when you look at this, the hearings were amazing, and Republicans were making excuses. North Carolina GOP was first saying, no, certify the election. They're like, no, let's actually have a hearing. And it was all this drama. Then when they actually had it, you had undeniable election fraud.
I mean, I lived in North Carolina for a long time, so this is the same North Carolina it's always been. And so I think what we saw a situation that was just so foul that Republicans couldn't say.
Even they were like,
yeah,
damn.
This is too
like,
bad.
Damn.
And this is something that he should actually go to jail for. I mean, he went after a person and hired a person that he knew had done this before. So this kind of ballot harvesting that they were doing, they knew this was happening.
And we don't even know how many other elections they were doing this in.
Exactly. And so that's the part that I think really concerns all of us, is that this one was so bad that they couldn't look away, but how many others were passable to them? Because there are a lot of counties, a lot of districts in North Carolina that are in and around the country that are probably in the very same situation.
If I had to have a segment, Monique, called This Motherfucker, it would probably, I probably would use it.
To you,
I probably would use it for this video right here. Press play, Mitch McConnell.
Madam President, anyone who's been attentive to the news these past few days has learned about the complete debacle that unfolded in last November's election for North Carolina's 9th congressional district. Soon after Election Day, allegations of illegal ballot harvesting and vote tampering clouded a close result. The wrongdoing seemed to have benefited the Republican candidate over the Democrat. Just last week, we saw the State Board of Elections unanimously call for a new election. Now, Madam President, for years and years, every Republican who dared to call for common sense safeguards for Americans' ballots was demonized by Democrats and their allies. We were hit with left-wing talking points insisting that voter fraud wasn't real. Never happens, they said. Well, that fraud just didn't happen. That modest efforts to ensure that voters who are who they say they are and are voting in the proper place were really some sinister right-wing plot to prevent people from voting. So now, as you might expect, now that an incident of very real voter fraud has become national news and the Republican candidate seems to have benefited, these long-standing Democratic talking points have been really quiet. Haven't heard much lately from Democrats about how fraud never happens. They've gone silent. Now some are singing a different tune. Now there's a new interest in ensuring the sanctity of American elections. I've been focused for decades on protecting the integrity of elections. So I'd like to welcome my friends on the left to their new realization. They've just discovered that this subject really matters.
Like I said, this money gone.
No, it makes me so furious.
Hold on, Chris. Monique, go ahead.
It truly makes me furious to the point that I could cry because I have watched this man ruthlessly grab power ever since he ascended to this position, and it is done in an amoral manner. And to be able to stand there and first call it voter fraud when he knows the difference between voter fraud and election fraud, and then two, to say that it's the Republicans who have cared about the sanctity of elections while they refuse to update the VRA so that we could have protected voting rights. It's beyond anything that you could fathom from somebody who has an obligation to serve the people of the United States. And
Chris,
he's disgraceful.
Chris, you want to comment? Go ahead.
Yeah. I think maybe somebody invaded his body or something. Did he just say
a long time ago?
Did he just say that was voter fraud, or did I?
Yeah,
hear that right?
He said it was voter fraud when it actually was election fraud, and he conveniently skipped over that it was the Republican Mark Harris who was doing it.
Yeah, well, how could it be voter fraud when the voters had nothing to do with it? I'm confused.
Well,
I'm confused.
Well, again, though, that's like me being confused with the Republican Party of sending a tweet out today trying to call Michael Cohen a liar when he was deputy finance chair for the same damn RNC. I'm like, that y'all thought we forgot? But again, this is what is hilarious here, because to your point, Republicans in North Carolina seat them, certify the election. Then the lie was so powerful. Yeah, we might want to have some hearings. They're like, but no, we still want to see. It was so. Then they had no choice then to call for a new election. Now Mark Harris, now he's sick. Now, I love this one when he was on the stand testifying. Okay, I love this one. He was on testifying, and then they hit him with, but your son said this, and he went, oh damn, I'm sick. I'm sick. I think I caught something right here, and so my memory is lapsing right now because I'm sick. No, your ass lying.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Don't believe.
Well, so this is one of the things, and Chris actually alluded to it earlier. This is one of those instances where Republicans make it hard for us, people like me, people like Chris, to really get
Black Republicans.
Yes.
Honest Republicans.
Yeah, to get people, to move people in any way. And I think part of the problem is that, a lot of these things, I think there are a lot of political calculations that have racial implications that the party does not understand. So they do things because they say, well, they're Democrats, so we're going to do these things. We're going to, push for these sort of policies, not understanding the racial implications. And so for us, we have to explain to them, okay, well, these are the racial implications, and they may not see that. I think it actually makes it difficult for us. I'm not going to say that all of this is intentional, with the intent to be racist or whatever the case may be. That element is definitely there, but I think a lot of these things are politically motivated, and because so many blacks are Democrats, it ends up becoming racial.
Bottom line is, Doc, they were sitting here trying to steal the damn election.
Exactly.
And they got busted, and now they got egg on their face, and now what it has done is it has exposed the voter operation they had there.
The fallacy.
They were sitting here trying to steal multiple elections. And again, and the other problem is you got the punk-ass U.S. attorney there in that area who refuses to go after Mark Harris, and he still walk around like he blind going, where is voter fraud, when it's sitting right in front of him, and he's done nothing to prosecute these folks in this case.
Well, and this is a great thing, at least in this moment, about transparency in records. Because if it was not for the records that North Carolina kept, we would have never been able to detect this. But this is the stuff that Mitch McConnell does that I think is dishonest. It's intellectually dishonest. He's not a dumb man. And he's playing footsie and playing cutesy with all these, it was voter fraud. He knows it was election fraud. Most people don't care enough to commit fraud on this scale. The people who care are the people who want to win. Right. And the people that they want to disable are black people, young people, Latino people, poor people, old people. And they do that, and they do it with impunity, and they don't care. And I don't like this idea that, they don't mean it. Yes, they do. These are not silly people. Democrat, black, Latino are almost synonymous. So we know who we're talking about. And so they don't do this in these districts not knowing. Bladen County, they know who lives there.
Right.
They know it down to the person, to the block. These people have an enormous amount of information that they are marshaling. Now, do they want to be able to hold on to black Republicans and hurt black Democrats at the same time? Yes. The problem is they cut their knees off because there are lots of black folks who would have sympathy with the party, but they cannot have sympathy with racists and people who want to say things like, we're not sure, because this is an illiberal, not democratic action that they're taking, but calling it protection of democracy. And It's the exact opposite of that, and it's to cut off any kind of conversation as you were talking about. It is manipulating people so that we can sort of forestall all of the consequences that should come from this, one of them being going to jail, paying fines, and all this other stuff. And it's not just Harris. It's everybody that enabled him. It's those people who signed those ballots. It's those people who didn't turn them in and threw them away. All of that is illegal, and we know it, and they know it.
Can I get a witness? All right, y'all. Earlier today, I was on Fox Business. And Charles Payne has his show on Fox Business. And so I got a call, and they said, hey, we're going to talk about Democrats and reparations. I'm going, all right, we can have that conversation. And so DeRoy Murdoch, a brother, he writes for National Review Online. They said that he was going to be opposite with me. Y'all could figure out how this conversation was going to go down. But let's go. Just in case you missed it, press play.
Some 2020 Democratic candidates are touting their support for reparations for slavery. Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and Julian Castro have all gotten on board with the idea. But before we all jump on the bandwagon, let's take a look at what the actual cost could be using those Pickford payouts to black farmers under the Obama administration. Of course, they were discriminated against by the USDA. Each were given $50,000. It was awarded to over 33,000 farmers or their heirs. So if we apply that same model right now to every black American and people of multicultural who say they have black descendants, then we're talking about $2.5 trillion. Joining me now to debate, Fox News contributor DeRoy Murdoch and hashtag Roland Martin, unfiltered host Roland Martin. Roland, let me start with you. I'm kind of surprised that 3 Democratic candidates have jumped on board with this as a central issue already. What do you make of it?
Well, first, we make the mistake by trying to automatically jump to the cost as to understanding why you're even having the conversation. When you talk about this year commemorating the 400th anniversary of 20-odd Africans arriving in Virginia in 1619, you have to look at American history to understand that it goes back to General Sherman and Special Order 15, 40 acres and a mule that was rescinded after Lincoln was killed. There was an effort to distribute land to freed slaves that was never passed by Congress. This nation it has always used the free labor of African Americans to build the country, but has never dealt with the reality of preventing black folks from being a part of the economic system in this country. Those are facts.
Roy?
Well, here's a fact. Slavery ended 154 years ago. It's been a long, long time since we had slavery in this country. And you have people who've come to this country, let's say the great wave of immigrants who came around in 1890, 1900. I think they're going to be really shocked and disgusted if this thing goes through. And you have people who may have come from Poland or Russia or Ireland, and they suddenly have got to pay money to the progeny of people who have not been enslaved for 150-odd years. And you have people like my family. I'm black, but my family came to the United States in 1962. My parents are from Costa Rica. Do I get a check? We had no role in American slavery.
What do you say?
This is going to be the most divisive.
One second, Roland, I'll let you in, but I do want to ask, what do you say to the folks who say it just wasn't when slavery ended, though? The Jim Crow laws. And all the things that came after that stopped black people from being able to enter into the U.S. economy like everyone else?
I think a lot of what we did to address that involved things like the Great Society, many of these public assistance programs. Most of those were launched right about the same time as the 64 Civil Rights Act, and many of those things were done in a sense of trying to get people sort of in a better state economically.
Roland, Charles, are you concerned, Roland, about, though, what DeRoy said, potential pushback from white folks in America saying, hey, I never owned a slave, and I don't know anyone who's ever been a slave.
Well, again, though, this is the problem when you have American history. And look, DeRoy actually said it. He doesn't even fully understand American history. The Great Compromise of 1877 ushered in Jim Crow. You had 92 years of Jim Crow. You talked about the Pickford. Actually, it did not end. Allow me, this book, Dr. King, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, where he talked about the issue, the practical cost of change for the nation up to this point has been cheap. He talked in this book where he talked about how even in 1967, 90% of the laws that were passed had not even been implemented. Here's the issue you're dealing with, Charles. You talk about the Pickford decision, the USDA discriminating against African Americans. The federal government's own housing policies, it was law discriminating against African Americans. The Fair Housing Act wasn't even passed until 1968, only because King got killed. So you could talk about slavery. There are African Americans today who were impacted by federal housing laws, and we know most wealth in America is a result of inheritance and also through housing. And so, DeRoy, do you deny that reality?
Look, it's been 51 years since the 68 Fair Housing Act. Okay, that's half a century. You want total incredible acrimony and racial strife and tension like we've never seen before. You make white folks who had nothing to do with slavery give money to black folks.
You keep saying slavery, but you can't ignore Jim Crow.
Including people, I'm somewhat prosperous, as is Charles. Do we get checks as well? Do we give a check to Ken Chenault, who is the CEO of American Express? He doesn't need that money. I think we should put our efforts and our money into school choice, into things that help little poor black kids learn and get prepared so they can succeed in our society. Not create a formula for total racial chaos and mayhem.
This is the mistake.
Awful, destructive policy idea that will demolish any kind of civility.
Speaking of destructive, you still have the people who built Black Wall Street in Tulsa, where the Oklahoma's apologized, but it's not paid for the damage. You look at Rosewood in Florida. We have facts where you have African Americans.
Do you think every black person in America would be entitled to pay out?
1 second. Here's the piece. In order for you to before you get to the cost, you need to study what the issue is first to understand that. And unfortunately, America has denied these realities.
Do you think every black person in America should get paid?
What needs to happen is you, as Castro said, supporting a bill that John Conyers submitted for a number of years. You need to study the issue first before you get to that. You can't deal with D unless you deal with A.
Yeah, you're pushing collective guilt.
No. I'm pushing history.
Social division. Shame on you.
I'm pushing history, and you don't know black history. You don't even know American history. I suggest you actually
study
learn
American history, read American history.
I suggest you learn more.
future of total mayhem, which I do not want to see.
Let's leave it there.
Disgusting idea.
Passion on both
Charles,
sides.
read this book.
I'll read it.
Dr.
DeRoy,
King, where do we
Roland.
go from here? You too, DeRoy.
Thank you both very much. We'll be right back.
Don't y'all love dumbasses who actually can't read? Monique, I think you want to comment.
So the part of the I Have a Dream speech of Dr. King's that nobody really wants to quote.
That top part?
Yeah.
Right.
They quote the riffs, right? Because that's all
They quote the dream part. Make us all feel good.
And it's real. But before that, he talks about that check that the United States of America has been, it came up insufficient funds back then. You know, it's been insufficient funds since we were slaves, and it's still a bounce check to this day. I don't care what they have to do to figure out who gets the check and who doesn't get the check. I don't care what they have to do, how many censuses they have to go through, whether the immigrants get it or don't. It has to be done. So these candidates who are taking the right stand in principle are, to me, taking the right first step. Now, how long it takes for all this to get figured out and how many Republican presidents we can survive and how many Republican legislatures before anything ever happens, I don't know. But this is very, very simple. Indians, Jewish people, how many others were given an opportunity for equality through transfer of property and or money?
Chris,
it has to be done.
Chris, I interviewed, I gave a keynote speech to a group of black construction companies. It was here in D.C. And I met a sister who was from North Carolina. And she's a lawyer. And part of her job, Chris, was to go out and check companies to ensure they weren't front companies. So she was talking to the sons of the largest construction company in North Carolina. She says, how did y'all get y'all start? And Chris, what she said was, the son said, well, our dad was in the Army. And it was the end of World War II. And he said, you know what, I'm going to start a construction company. So they had some surplus equipment in the Army. And he said, hey, y'all mind if I take some of this equipment because, you know, war's over, we don't need it. And they were like, sure. They were white. So he takes this equipment, he goes and starts his construction company. And as we were talking, I said, you can't find me a black soldier who got a shovel. Not equipment, a shovel. So here's this white man who used government benefits, government property, to start his construction company. And so now his sons are second-generation owners of the largest multi-million-dollar construction company in North Carolina because they got government property. And so when you have this conversation, people act as if, that's why I kept going back to, dude, you keep talking about slavery. You can't act like 1900, 1910, 1920, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 didn't exist, because the point I was making when you talk about those laws, again, in King's book, he writes in 1967 that 90% of those laws passed were not even implemented in 67. You still had housing discrimination lawsuits that are continuing today. And folks act like, well, it's no big deal. Y'all just making lots of noise. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, personally, I'm not a big reparations fan. That's my view. But I think on the issue of reparations, what we really have to do is to educate people, not just on the end of slavery, but also on the effects and the lingering effects that helped move the needle forward. And I think that's a large part of the conversation. And in my experience, that's why a lot of people are simply ignoring it, because they're saying, well, slavery's over, without consideration of Jim Crow or any of those kinds of things. They're not taking a holistic view of it. And I think that frankly, is the challenge.
Doc, the problem, again, that was an issue that I was having with DeRoy again. And my deal is, look, it's some folks who are born here who know what the hell he's talking about. Right. Just because he's from Costa Rica. But when Chris talks about effects, and that's the piece that people, again, don't want to deal with. And that is, how did you arrive at this point? The point I'm making about housing is, if y'all want to get into a debate about, well, slavery, that's fine. But for the purpose of the discussion, I'm going to deal with Jim Crow. The reality is my parents were impacted by the inability of their parents from being able to purchase homes wherever they wanted to. We had clear and undeniable federal laws that kept black people from buying homes. White person over here could buy a home here, resell it at a much higher price. Black neighborhoods, a lot of the places they couldn't even own the homes there, and then the resale value was a joke. Black folks were greatly impacted by federal housing laws today. That's Jim Crow. That is what you also have to fix when you talk about, and what's the deal now? What's the black home ownership rate today? Not even 42%.
And in our neighborhoods are systematically devalued, and that is in today's dollars. So we don't even have to go to Jim Crow. We can look right now at how insurance industries and the lending industry have bankrupted black communities and undervalued black communities. But I will take issue with one point in this sort of conversation about, well, what about white people and how they feel? I am paying for a war. We are paying for a war we don't agree with, many of us, because we pay taxes. So when we talk about reparations for Japanese in the 1980s, black people paid for that. Native American people, Latino people who didn't intern anybody
paid for wars and had black soldiers who served in the wars fighting for freedom, and they could not take advantage of the very same freedom.
And reparations is essentially black folks giving America, the government, interest-free loan for the last 400 plus years.
It's a debt. And
it is a debt.
That's different than even paying for a war. It's like money we owe to another country. We don't have a choice to say, oh, we've owed that money since 1925. We'll just decide not to pay it. Of course, we don't pay our bills, but that's how it is.
But
Chris, we all pay it.
Chris, my greatest problem with Chris Messler was Malik. My greatest issue with what Chris Messler was talking about, which is my issue with DeRoy and folks like him, is that they don't even understand American history. They don't even understand the fact that 243 years of slavery, 10 to 12 years of Reconstruction, 92 years of Jim Crow, and then if you use 1970 as the marker, black people have been technically fully free Americans for 49 years. And not only that, the reality is the Fair Housing Act was only passed because it was filibustered for 3 years, and Dr. King had to be assassinated for the House to actually pass it after the filibuster was actually ended in the Senate. But the thing that jumps out at me is that, which the reality, he's talking about, well, how are white folks going to feel? The problem is that there are white people who have no clue about American history, who have no clue about Black Wall Street in Tulsa, no clue about Rosewood. Those are just two that we know primarily because of a book and a movie. The reality is, you can go across the country and you can find Beaumont, Texas, Springfield, Illinois, numerous black neighborhoods that were burned down and gutted and destroyed because of racism, and it was done by cops who stood by government, politicians who stood by government, and none of those places were rebuilt. You can show black people who were run out of the South saying, nigga, we will kill you if you don't leave. Black people who literally left hundreds of acres of land to escape being lynched. That was not, and they were not being protected by cops. That is government. And so when you had, so when white folks, like I had one white dude who sent me an email saying, nigga, let me go ahead and read this here. And it was I need to read this for y'all to understand the reality, what you're dealing with. So he sends me this email, Jonathan Morse. You can pull your dumb nigga shit on CNN, but do yourself a favor and stay off Charles Payne's show. He is too smart for you and makes you look like a stupid fool. That's what I'm talking about. Go ahead, Malik.
Yeah. So here, it's hard to even respond to something as offensive as that. Unfortunately, reparations has in many ways become a distraction. You know, we can discuss ways, whether we're talking about the early 1900s, you know, the red line, the makings of the ghettos, for instance, the making of the ghettos.
That were created.
Right, the makings of the ghetto, where we're talking about
by
Chicago.
City, county, state, and federal governments.
Whether we're talking about Chicago, whether we're talking about New York, the redlining that went on.
Yep.
You know, there are a lot of, and I think this is, you know, kind of what Chris touched on as far as how we deal with the vestiges of slavery. And whether that's through, you know, the era of Jim Crow, there are a lot of things that we have done. I think there are a lot of things that left that we need to do, but things that we're talking about in cities you can just look here in D.C. You know, you're talking about housing. You know, Ari Teresa, one of my friends, Ari Teresa actually just filed a $1 billion lawsuit against the District of Columbia because, and I think if I'm quoting correctly, for efforts to purposely displace black people in favor of gentrification. And I'm saying this to say, you know, this has been a bipartisan problem that both sides have ignored. What reparation looks like?
This ain't both sides. No. This ain't both sides, okay? Because, see, in this case here, I ain't dealing with sides. No, I'm going to deal with sides. I'm going to deal with white. I'm going to deal with black. Those are the sides. They ain't left, right, Republican, Democrat. Because the reality is white folks benefited, Republican or Democrat. But this is the issue. And look, we're going to have other discussions on this. But let me say this here, and then I'll let each one of you comment on this before we end. And that is, you cannot find in American history 15 consecutive years of sustained black growth. 204, August 1619, first 21 Africans arriving. So you go from there to Emancipation Proclamation, 243 years. And when you look at 10 to 12 years of Reconstruction, 5 years into Reconstruction, white folks are like, all right, y'all, we good. All right, look, we done enough for y'all. 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, 1860 Civil Rights Act. What the hell more do y'all want? Okay. So then you go to 1876, the Great Compromise of 1877, gets into effect. Jim Crow, now 92 years. Emmett Till gets killed August 28, 1955. Montgomery starts December 1st, 1955. Let's say it goes through the Fair Housing Act. It's 13 years. It's 13 years, okay? But the reality is that still wasn't economic growth for black people. That was fighting for rights. Then, of course, you have Hatcher, elected mayor in Gary, Indiana, Stokes in Cleveland, Maynard Jackson, elected mayor of Atlanta, Coleman Young in Detroit, Mayor Marion Barry in D.C., these black mayors elected. So let's say, okay, fine, that's 70, say late 68, 80, what happens? Okay, growth for black folks in business, 0.0012% of the contracts in Atlanta when Maynard gets elected at 12 cents for every $100. That's 12 years. 1980, Ronald Reagan. In the affirmative action programs, Supreme Court rulings, okay, about 10, 12 years. But then when you go through Reagan, let's say you get to Clinton, okay, fine, you get to Clinton, okay, America goes up, highest point of black home ownership ever is there, and all of a sudden, Bush becomes president, thing collapses by 2007. We lost 53% of all black wealth. Now you're still trying to build. So the reality is, black people, for 400 years, went here, then here. Went here, then here. Then went here, then here. We didn't go here and come down to here. No, we literally went here and dropped all the way down here. So you have not had sustained economic. So we've literally had to restart every single effort, which is why if you look at black wealth right now, you see why it's $5,000 or whatever. Average white is $110,000. And Chris, that's what white folks who have no understanding of American history don't realize.
Well, and that's exactly it. The conversation has to be exactly what I said about effects. It also has to be about state actor and state action, particularly in the creation
or inaction
of ghettos. Or, well, yeah, inaction. But I'm talking specifically about the creation of ghettos from a housing standpoint. There were state actors involved in creating those. So we've got to look at all of those things and explain that and it's not just white folk. I think it's a lot of folks, including black folks, who don't really understand that.
Monique?
Yeah.
Right, so the thread that you can see is from not being able to own property to creation of not just ghettos, but
being property and not being able to own property.
But that's what I was going to say, larger rental communities because of an inability to own. It's not just in the poorer areas where you're dependent on government housing, because that's what people say. They want to turn it into a personal accountability kind of issue. No. Because of the lack of ability to own the home, you're renting, and then comes gentrification.
And the rents were higher than the white folks who moved out.
You get the rent higher, but then the rental properties and the ghettos convert to ownership property, right?
We don't get
and
part of
then we cannot stay on our own land. So if they're trying to figure out when the harm stopped, the harm has not stopped yet. And so it's just a question of how you quantify the worth of that harm.
And just to mention, D.C. has I think it was 2017 at that point, D.C. had the largest income disparity in the nation. In the entire nation. We have a very educated class here, but that's just another thing that we can look at when we're talking about, things that we can do. Reparations aside, let's look at those type of policies. Let's look at what we're doing around gentrification to, get black people, to lift black people up. I think that's when I said that reparations, in a sense, sometimes ends up being a distraction. Let's talk about all of the things that the Obama administration is doing to address that. Let's actually talk about the things that the federal government is doing right now to address that. These things are happening.
But the reality, Doc, is you can't deal with just the housing piece if you don't deal with the wages piece, and you don't deal with the education piece, and you don't deal with the other pieces. And that's the fundamental problem. America wants to have, that's why when you heard DeRoy talk about the anti-poverty programs, what he did not want to confront is the reality that the anti-poverty programs were actually working. Read the book Nixon Land. They were working, but it was middle-class white folks who got mad saying, why is my money going to these damn black people, when the reality is a lot of the money was going to broke-ass white people, and the broke-ass white people would understand that if you even go back to the 1800s after the Civil War, broke white people's quality of life increased because of what freed slaves were doing. Go listen to Dr. King's speech he gave in Montgomery after the Selma to Montgomery March, where he talked about the advances that were happening between poor white people and black people. And it was rich white folks who said, oh, hell no, we can't have broke white people and freed slaves getting together. And so they utilized the media to create the wedge of Jim Crow, which has still lasted today, because you got broke white people who think, look, I might be broke as hell, but I'm not black. And so that's what you're dealing with. That is the story of America, Doc. And again, America has never wanted to own up to what it has done for 399 and a half years to people of African descent.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say whiteness is intoxicating, and white supremacy as an ideology that tells you that your white skin makes you better than everybody else. I mean, that's something to believe in when you don't have very much. And it didn't take much to separate poor whites from blacks. But I will say this, I mean, whether it is fair housing programs, I mean, we have to talk about health disparities. We have to talk about all of these things because stress kills black people at exorbitant rates, right? We know it's not just about, it's about a lot of things, but it needs to be focused on black people.
But the other pieces is here, when you also didn't have an opportunity to have a high-paying job, damn it, you can't afford health care. You've been frozen out. You were frozen out of Wall Street. You were frozen out of banks. You were frozen out of numerous jobs. That's the piece that that DeRoy didn't understand when his parents come from Costa Rica in 1962. Like, dude, you don't understand. Black people were frozen out of every single level in America. You had black PhDs who were pushing brooms.
Well, and also it's also those same black people that made it possible for DeRoy's parents to come here and have some of the freedoms that they did enjoy in the United States. So black people do a lot of the work for lots of other people, and a lot of people want the benefits and none of the burdens. But I will say this. We have to insist that if reparations, whatever it's going to look like, that it has to be focused on black people, because people say, oh, it's affirmative action. Affirmative action wasn't focused on black people.
No, actually it wasn't.
And the particularities of the community.
Well, first of all, it wasn't, because, again, for folks who don't even understand the history, that was actually put in place. White women have benefited more than anybody else. And, in fact, you had a white racist out of Virginia, Homer Smith, who thought that he was going to shut down a 64 Civil Rights Act, putting women in it, when in fact it actually had it passed, which is why I tell white women all the time, y'all run around talking about Title IX. That wasn't about no damn sports. Title IX is about opening professional schools, lawyers, doctors, dentists, professors, engineers, to largely white women. So y'all were benefiting from that. And if y'all ask where it came from, a provision of 1964 Civil Rights Act. And so again, people need to understand, they have no understanding, again, of history and how all these pieces fit together. Folks, do this here. I sent this to Charles Payne, and I sent to him on tweet as well. Again, and look, y'all can tell, I done went through 3 highlighters reading this book here. So y'all can see all the yellow that's in this page here. This book was written by Dr. King in 1967. He gets killed April 4, 1968. This book was not published a decade after his death. I think some folk did not want us reading. This is, I got 1,000 books in my library. You read this book, you'll be blown away because he literally talks about what it takes in order for African Americans to be able to get ahead in America. The book is Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? If you want to order it, go to the MLK, go to the King Center in Atlanta, because you order from there, they get a cut of it, okay? So if y'all want to help the King Center, damn it, go buy this book. Every black person should have a copy of this book. I'm just being straight up. And real quick, before I went on the show, I had this book. Mary Frances Berry, we had her on the show, my previous show. She wrote this book. It's called My Face is Black, It's True, Callie House and the Struggles for Ex-Slave Reparations. So Mary Frances Berry, a former head of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, actually wrote this book as well. Just an amazing book she wrote as well. And so I'll tweet both of these out for y'all as well, for you to check out. And so again, this is not the last time we're going to have the conversation. You're hearing the question that's come up. Again, the reason I refuse to have a dollar amount conversation is because they want you to short circuit the discussion. And so I'm not going to have a dollar amount conversation. And I think on the whole issue, when people say it should be for blacks only, no, you can actually create policies that are need based. And if you create very specific, now follow me, there's a way to do it, because again, understanding laws, I'm taking into account Supreme Court decisions when it comes to what is race-based. Right. I also understand that when you create need-based, damn it, you're still talking about us in some cases. It's just understanding how this game is played. Y'all should look up the the Clyburn Amendment, where Congressman Clyburn says that any federal bill passed, 10% of the money goes to counties where 20% or more of the people have lived below the poverty line for at least 30 years. And Chris and Malik.
And that's across the board.
But here's the piece. 2/3 of those counties are in Republican districts. But Republicans don't want to deal with that because they don't want to deal with broke-ass white people. I'm just saying. Chris Metzler, I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Y'all, Chris's new book, we're going to talk about it later. It's called Divided We Stand, The Search for America's Soul. And so we're going to do a one-on-one interview with you later about that. Monique, Malik, and Doc, appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Glad to have you here. Dr. Naomi Carter, she, first of all, Howard University, assistant professor in the Department of Political Science. Y'all come down. Okay, all right, Dr. Naomi Carter. Of course, there's some Hampton people, the controllers saying, damn, y'all, we the real HU. It don't matter. I'm Texas A&M, so y'all can holler H, well, all y'all want to. All right, y'all, here's a piece. The conversation that we have here in Roland Martin Unfiltered, you ain't seeing elsewhere. And so that's why we want you to support. Go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar you give via Cash App, via PayPal, via Square, goes to support this show. As I told you, this weekend, I'm going to be going to Selma for Bloody Sunday. We're going to be live streaming stuff Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so, again, that's what I guarantee y'all, CNN not going to be there. MSNBC's not going to be there. Fox News, ABC, CBS, NBC won't be there. We're going to be there. And so that's what your dollars go to support. And so we want y'all to, again, I would love to have 100 of you sign up today, join our Bring the Funk fan club. We're asking $50 each for you for the whole year. You can give monthly, you can give yearly, doesn't matter. We want you to support what we do because we must be in control of our own voice, our narrative, but also we got to fund our freedom. All right, folks, I will see you guys tomorrow. Holla! You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.